Well, it's that time of year again where we start to gear up for elections. Like we say here in Virginia, there's an important election every year. And 2024 is no less important. Matter of fact, people are saying it's the most important election of our time. Joining us to talk about what does it mean in order to be out and organizing, to be engaged in elections, and the importance of registering to vote, we have with us NSU alum David Washington, political consultant and community outreach specialist. It's Stay the Water. You'll be right back in just a moment. Welcome back. It's Stay the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Eric LaVille. As always, I'd like to thank you for joining us, as you always do, on this Sunday, as we take a look at elections. Now, we hope that all of you enjoyed your Memorial Day weekend and enjoyed time with family. And yes, Memorial Day marks the beginning of the summer. But also here in Hampton Roads, in all the greater Virginia, it marks the beginning of our major political season. That's right. The General Assembly is over. Now it's time to pivot toward the election. That's right. It's 2024. And in 2024 even years, we elect every 4 years the president of the United States of America. And also on the ballot, we have also our U.S. representative. We have some mayors on the ballot this year as well. And then this year, we also have one of our U.S. senators. So it's a lot going on, always a lot going on. We're going to see a lot of political ads. We're going to see a lot of things, especially with the guilty verdict of former President Donald Trump in the first trial. And all of this is going to come to a head and come into play. But still, it's all about the basics, all about the fundamentals. It's all about one person, one vote. It's all about understanding the issues. It's all about making sure that your voice is heard through your officials. But there's another way you can make sure that your voice is heard, and that's by being engaged. Look, joining us today, we have with us an NSU alum and someone who has been engaged in the political space since day one. And that's none other than Mr. David Washington, who's a political consultant and community outreach specialist. Mr. Washington, thank you for coming on Stay the Water.
Thank you so much for having me. I really do appreciate it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, before we go any further, I always talk about everywhere I go, I see a Spartan, but not just a Spartan, but a Spartan doing great things. And I remember we were at the town hall that I moderated in Chesapeake with Senator Lucas and Delegate Hayes and also Delegate Benita Anthony and Delegate Nadarius Clark. And the gymnasium was full. The community center was full. And it was a great showing of a lot of people. And it showed really how engaged the community is. And that's where I met you. I've seen you around quite a bit, but that's where we had a chance to really chat it up. And you were there, yep. Being engaged and organizing and so forth. So, again, I just want the public to know that, once again, I met another great Spartan that's making major moves and changes in this area. So I want you to tell us a little bit about who is David Washington and how did you really get involved in politics? When did that bug bite you?
Well, thank you. That bug bit me at a very young age. I grew up in Detroit, Michigan. I grew up in what you would call a city machine, where a group of pastors, along with the pastor of my church, came together. Actually, one of those pastors is Aretha Franklin's father. Was one of those pastors. Yes, for those that don't know, Aretha Franklin's father was very politically active in the city of Detroit. So he was a part of those movers and shakers, along with my pastor and several other pastors. The Winings were part of that political machine, and so these pastors came together, and they pretty much, I don't want to say handpicked, but Comey Young, Barbara Rose Collins, Carolyn Cheeks Kilpatrick, her son Kwame Kilpatrick, a lot of people, a lot of African Americans, John Conyers, a lot of African Americans that got their opportunities to run for public office came through that machine in the 70s and the 80s. So I grew up in Detroit in the 80s. I'm an 80s baby. So I was right there in the thick of that. So growing up, I was knocking on doors when I was 10, 11 years old.
Wow.
I was at the polls at a very young age. So I was at rallies, campaign rallies at a young age. So for me, the bug caught me extremely early, and it was always a passion of mine. My first paid job was working on the mayoral race back in 2000. Outside of the 4 years that I served in the Navy, I was always working on someone's campaign. And even when I got out the Navy, I took an internship with the DNC, with the Democratic National Committee, and then I got a paid job with a gentleman by the name of Senator Barack Obama. And a lot of folks didn't know how to pronounce his name. That was my number one job, is to help folks pronounce his name right back then. Those were the good old days.
It's funny. I'm around smiling because, your story kind of resembles mine. Being from Louisiana, that political bug bites you like a mosquito, right? It bites every boy. Yeah. And the door to door, the engagement of the pastors and the churches in our community and politics. It's just not civil rights, but it was the politics. And of course, taking care of the flock and the people and the needs of the community from a spiritual level. So that's amazing, that you're able to experience it and be a part of that legacy. The preachers that you mentioned, they are legendary across many things. So that is absolutely amazing in itself. And then working for Senator Barack Obama, how was that?
That was a point in my life where I was extremely passionate and wide-eyed, and I wanted to be a part of making history. When I was first approached by the Obama campaign to be the deputy, at the time I was the deputy state director for Alabama. When I was given that opportunity, I just saw an opportunity to make history and to work with some great people. And it was very historic because it was like I was taking in Alabama. It was like I was taking a walk through history, because the same pastors that Martin Luther King and Ralph Abernathy were trying to talk to about convincing them about the Montgomery bus boycott and trying to sell them on the idea of coming together and protesting the things that they were going on in Alabama. I was going to the sons and grandsons of those very same pastors, talking to them about this guy named Barack Obama, and trying to sell them on the fact that, yes, we can win this presidential primary, and yes, he can be the president of the United States. It's realistic. And it was like I said, it was literally like going through his walk, taking a walk with King and Abernathy through history, and having those conversations, going from protesting and fighting for folks to just have the right to sit wherever they want to sit on the bus, to us having a real conversation about a black man becoming president of the United States. It was very surreal.
Once again, that is absolutely phenomenal, to have that legacy and to know exactly, what's what, right? And be a part of that history. So let's talk organizing. We've got the primary election coming up, but I want to talk organizing. Why is it important for us to be engaged, not just go vote, but just to be engaged in the process itself?
Because I've always believed that if you are not a part of the discussion, if you are you're not even a part of what's going on in your community, what's going on within your state, you do not factor, and you become a victim of the decisions of those that normally do not have your best interests at heart. And you have to be a part of the process in order to have a say in the process. And that's what I've tried to, tell people, that it's not just about voting on election day. You want to have people that are in these positions of power that represent you, that will speak for you, that, if you were to reach out to them, they will answer the phone. If you were to send them an email, they would respond. You want to have you want to be engaged. You want to elect folks that are engaging, and so for me, all politics is local. The person that represents you on school board and city council is just as important as the person that represents you in the White House. And folks need to understand that there is power in their vote. And your vote is your voice, and it needs to be sacred. For me, voting is sacred, and that's one of the things that I've always instilled. Because one of my main roles is I am the intersection. When I work for the Democratic Party, for the DNC and the DCCC, the Democratic Coordinated Campaign, I am usually the bridge between the pastors and the party. And what I try to emphasize to the pastors is that voting is sacred. This is a sacred trust, and I want the pastors to have a voice when it comes to the political spectrum of what's going on in this nation, because when issues and situations going on in the community, who do the people go to first? They don't go to the elected officials. They go to the pastors. They go to the church. So the church needs to be engaged in terms of what's going on in the electoral space, and those that get elected need to be engaged with those in the church community, because the people are normally when they're in need, they usually go to the church first. So the pastors know what the pastors and the deacons know a heck of a lot that's going on, more so in the community than the elected officials. So it's a symbiotic relationship that must be nurtured and curated and make sure that they're talking to one another.
Absolutely. You mentioned the church, and of course, I came up in a church culture. My father served half a century in the Church of God in Christ, and that's pretty much all we knew growing up. And with that, it's amazing to see how the church is still the center of the community, servicing all the needs. And you're right. When there's a problem, they say, hey, call the pastor, right?
Right.
So there's a lot that's there on their shoulders. And, of course, we honor all of them that's serving. With that being the case, you mentioned making sure your voice is heard and being engaged. We have a generation now that is very cynical of politics. And, of course, given what we see and things that have happened, especially in Washington, school boards during COVID and things that took place, the foolishness that persons were espousing, you can kind of see, where they can believe that and not want to engage. But at the same time, we also saw where getting engaged and putting people in office that will actually work for the people, it yields a lot of great fruit, whether it be the election of President Biden getting us out of COVID, or the historic election of the General Assembly and the amount of African Americans elected to office in diverse districts as well, and what was passed, and the efficiency of the General Assembly. So how do you bridge the gap? How do we bridge the gap with the generation that says, I don't want to deal with it, but you and I know that we have to stay engaged no matter what?
Well, it's about advocacy. And to me, first of all, engagement cannot just start in September, October, November. Engagement must be year round. The conversation must always continue even after the election. One of the mistakes that I believe folks in my position and those that deal with party politics, one of the mistakes that I think that we've made is that, the only time they see you is in September after Labor Day. After Labor Day, that's when everybody shows up and they want to get in everybody's face, and the commercials are nonstop, and they're blowing up your phone. And now texting is all the rage now, and they're sending you 1,001 text messages asking you for money, asking you for your vote, asking you to make a donation to whatever cause they may have. But the conversation needs to be year round. That's one of the things that I do in my lobbying. The lobbying side of what I do is I try to engage folks year round, and then also take whatever issues and concerns that those in the community have, and I take those things to Richmond. I take those things to Washington D.C. and I speak to those folks that are in power, and I advocate for the community, and say, hey, this is what the community is telling me. This is the issues. This is what's going on. If that's voting rights, if that's climate change, if that's veterans asking for more support, if that's small businesses asking for more support. To me, the advocacy part and keeping folks engaged, and that's what I ask for young adults to do. And I think that's a great way of keeping them engaged and involved in what's going on in the community. Is that just don't vote and then that's it. No. Find out what's going on at the local level. Find out what's going on in your city council. Find out what's going on in your school board. Find out what's going on in your state legislature. What are they voting on? What is the city budget investing in? What is the school board budget investing in? It doesn't take a whole lot. You have it on your phone. Your phone is a computer. You have it right here at your laptop, at your tablet. The information is right there at your fingertips. All you got to do is just do a quick Google search, and you can find it. Or you can just or go to your city hall, go to your local city hall, go to your local school board meetings, and do the things to try to keep yourself engaged and knowledgeable about what's going on in your locality. And then people can feel like, okay, yeah, I have an invested stake in what's going on. You have to be engaged in the process. You can't be just, I call it armchair political consultants, folks that watch MSNBC and CNN all day, and but you got to be engaged.
Absolutely.
You can't just look at it. You got to be engaged in it.
Absolutely.
And some folks that's tough. And when you're a working class family, working two jobs, trying to pay your bills, trying to survive and live and thrive in this world, you don't have a whole lot of time to do all that.
That's right.
That's understandable. But that's why I feel like that's where folks like me come in.
That's right.
And I let me be an advocate. Let me fight for you in those halls of power. And I'll make sure to report back.
Absolutely. And that's what we're here for, Stay the Water, to make sure that we bring movers and shakers and policymakers like yourself to discuss issues important to the community so that they could be a more well-informed listener. And you're listening to Stay the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Eric LaVille. Joining us is Mr. David Washington, NSU alum, political consultant, and community engagement outreach specialist. We're looking at the election preview, 2024, but we're talking about the foundation of elections, being engaged, organizing, how to register to vote, and the importance of registering to vote, and the importance of making sure your voice is heard other than just voting. It's about engagement. David, we were talking about outreaching and organizing and making sure that, being that connection between the community and using the church as a community, because the community tends to go to the church, and the others, the system itself. Now, I want us to compare and contrast that for our audience with being, as you mentioned, a lobbyist. Now, you and I both know that the lobbyist is a bad word now because of what happened years ago with Abramoff, but being a government relations specialist or political consultant, what's the difference in being that community outreach person and that political consultant or government relations specialist?
Yeah, for the community outreach is you're really dealing with people, regular folks, one-on-one. You're keeping them engaged about what's going on in the community. You're pretty much, you want to know what's going on in the community, so then you can report back to those folks that are in power that, hey, this is what's going on. This is what the people are saying, and then vice versa. You can go to those community leaders and say, okay, hey, this is what is going on in your state legislature. This is what's going on in City Hall. This is what's going on in D.C. So you're kind of like you're kind of like playing the middleman in that situation. But as a consultant, my job is to identify candidates that want to run for office, help them train themselves up to get ready to run for office, help them hire a staff, help them with their debate prep, help them with their speech writing, help them get engaged with the local community leaders, business leaders, whatever they need in terms of make sure they get their name on the ballot, which is a whole process, especially if you're trying to run for Congress. It's a headache. People don't understand the paperwork and the money that it takes to just file for Congress, file for U.S. Senate. It's a lot of administrative type work. So you want to make sure that all that stuff is good to go, so they get their name on the ballot. So being a consultant is more so you're kind of one-on-one with an individual candidate, or in my case, sometimes I have a group of candidates that I'm working with for a particular election cycle. So you're more so you're really hands-on. We're helping them build their campaign infrastructure so that they can run the best possible campaign. So that's pretty much a difference between the two.
Now, when we take a look at being a government relations specialist, so that's political consulting. You're consulting with the elected official. Also, being the community outreach, you're connecting the information, the politician, to the community so they can make a more well-informed decision. But government relations, that's the lobbying side. And right. That's the policy.
That's the policy side of it, and I call that. That's when I do in that window in the off. I call it the off season for when that right. window where not a whole lot of politics is going on in terms of campaign. Is that in Virginia? Is that January till April window? And I spend a lot of time in Richmond. I spend a lot of time in Washington D.C. I'm either representing a climate organization. I'm representing a voting rights organization. Now, I think, like you said, lobbying is sometimes folks take it as a bad word. For me, I like to think I represent the good guys. I represent the organizations, the nonprofits that are fighting the corporations, that are fighting the big money folks. Right. So we're, so I represent the side of working class folks. Of folks that want to see change in their communities. Right now, I'm dealing with a situation in Chesterfield, Virginia, where the president of Chesterfield, the president of the NAACP in Chesterfield, asked me and several other nonprofit leaders to help her stop a gas plant from being built smack dab in the middle of the Black community. If you look at it, if you look at the map where they want to build it, the plant will be like literally within miles of several schools that are predominantly African American schools. So those are the kind of work that I do when it comes to the policy side of it. I go to Richmond, go to D.C. and advocate and be an advocate for those communities and try to be a voice for them and fight on their behalf. So we try to fight the big corporations, and sometimes we win, sometimes we lose. It's a labor of love. I've been on vacation, and a breaking news happens on CNN, and I have to pull out my laptop because Congress has decided to go against a bill that I was fighting for. Right. And we have to, what breaks loose, and it's a tough gig. Of those who may be interested in getting into this life, understand that you have to make time for your family. I have a wife. I have 2 children. You have to make time for your family because this can easily be a 24 hours a day, 7 days a week type of life. but you have to definitely try to make time for your family and for yourself, for your mental health, so that you don't burn yourself out. Because you can easily get burned out in this business.
Absolutely. Look, when you mention that scenario, something coming down the pipe and you get a call, that was just like me just this past week when the verdict dropped and people were asking questions and we had to give analysis on it. So, no, you're exactly right. It's always engaged. And that's one thing I love about it, because it's never the same, but you have the opportunity to make a difference with people in our communities. David, I want us to take a look at the elections that are coming up. Let's talk a little bit about what's at stake here, the importance of getting out there, getting engaged, how you can get to a town hall or find out about it, contact a candidate, or how you can register actually to vote. So in 2024, this June, we have what we call our June primary elections. And in June, this is where individuals go to the polls and you select a candidate of your choice to run in that particular race for the party that you identify with. So if you're a Democrat, you will get a Democratic ballot. You'll have Democrats who are running against each other for the nomination to represent your party or that party in the general election in November. So case in point, you'll have President Joe Biden and several others vying for your vote to be the candidate to represent you. So you'll choose a candidate, and then after the primary, you'll see them on the ballot in November. So with that, we have, of course, the president is the big top of the list. So we have presumptive nominees, President Biden, and also former President Donald Trump on the Republican side. And we have our federal officers. Of course, every U.S. congressperson is on the ballot. And this year, we have U.S. Senator Tim Kaine as on the ballot himself. David, let's talk federal first. We know all politics is local. Kofi Annan said that. However, what's happening in this election is trickling down all the way to even, churches. They're talking about this. What can you tell the public about this federal election, what's at stake, and how they can get engaged and learn more about their candidate and why they should go register to vote?
Well, yes. So let's talk federal. Of course, the presidential is going to be, it looks like, for all intents and purposes, despite what's going on in New York with former President Donald Trump, is going to be Joe Biden. Joe Biden's going to get the Democratic nomination. Donald Trump's going to get the Republican nomination, and those two are going to go head to head. That election, and this is what I've been trying to warn Democrats about, is a lot of Democrats are assuming that Donald Trump, because he's getting some legal trouble, that, this is a slam dunk. Nobody's going to vote Donald Trump. He's a convicted felon, blah, blah, blah. They need to get that out their mind. I believe that Joe Biden's team is taking the right tack in terms of saying, this changes nothing. We still have to work. We still have to do everything we can in order to win this election. And I tell you why. Michigan, Ohio, Virginia, Florida, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Arizona, Colorado. Those states.
What about Nevada and Georgia? Nevada and Georgia as well. But it's just a hand out of 50 states. That's a handful of states that are really going to decide who wins this election. And how do those people feel? How do folks in Arizona, in Colorado, in Nevada, in Michigan, in Virginia, in Florida, in North Carolina, how are they feeling about Donald Trump? And we're assuming, a lot of folks in New York and in Los Angeles, in California, they're assuming that everyone feels the way they feel, and I think that's a mistake. We have to convince the American people, we supposed to that work in my space, we have to convince and sell Joe Biden is the best candidate in order to win United States president. If we do not, Donald Trump will win. Yeah, absolutely.
And if the job, and that is something that when I get an opportunity to get in those meetings and have these conversations, I am, that's what I am pushing every single time.
Well, to actually get out there and make your voice heard. David, look, we're pushing up against time here. We got to have you back because, there was some great information there, great conversation, but, election season isn't over. So we definitely got to have you back, David. Of course, we're out of time right now. But again, I want to make sure everybody knows that early voting has started for the primary. You can go register to vote, register in your local area, your clerk's of court office, and make sure that your voice is heard. This is Stay in the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Eric LaVille. We'll see you next time. Until then, be good, be great, and God bless.
Hi, I'm Carrie Washington, and you're listening to State of the Water with award-winning host Dr. Eric Claville.